Welcome to the One and Other podcast, where we explore the beauty of difference and the necessity of connection. I'm Sarah, your host, and this is episode 6. Here we are, once again. Thanks, ladies. I'm excited to jump into this conversation again around the divine feminine. We introduced it last week, so if those of you missed that, please go back to episode 5 where we discussed what we mean by this concept of the divine feminine. And yeah, today I think we're going to jump into some more practical ways that the divine feminine and this concept has changed us, has impacted the way we live, the things that we do, our practices, how we feel, maybe even in our bodies. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the things we had started talking, and sometimes that happens where we wish we had been recording all along. So,
whoops.
Yeah. I've been really inspired to look back at some of the books that have impacted me over the last several years. And I was just reading through some of those and feeling the reminder of how much in our culture we've had a separation between, I guess you would say, the archetypal feminine and masculine without knowing it. So one of the big aspects of life that would be categorized as feminine, more feminine, is embodiment. So we touched on that last week a little bit, but this idea of being in a body really relates to more than just our human bodies, but it relates to everything that has a body. So the earth as a body, plants and animals and insects and minerals and water and all the things that are tangible and physical. A neat thing that I love is that the word material, the word matter, both come from the Latin mater, which means mother. And that has always really stuck with me. Like, oh, okay, all that is material is connected to our divine mother. And for me, that feels really big, and it feels really important, and it feels like something that I was not given. It feels like something, there's this real deep sense of grief in me when I sit with that, like, because I'm a woman and a mother. If I would imagine, after I'm gone, someone looking back and seeing my children and saying, they are there because of their father. Like, wow, what a great dad that these beings exist. And that's not true, but that's not the whole truth. Like, they exist because there were two. They exist because of the equal balance of two that came together to create this new life. And I think maybe that's a little conceptual, but when we bring it back to what does it mean if we live in a world that has no divine mother, then certain things happen. And I think one of those things, which is the way that our culture in the recent last several hundred thousands of years, I don't know, have existed, is we have been living as if we have no mother. And so all that is sacred has been attributed to things that relate to, the mind. And when we talk about God or the divine, we think of up in the sky, or we think of a holiness that is separate. Mm-hmm. And this idea of mother, a divine mother, being related and connected to matter and our bodies and the earth, when you bring back a sense of the sacred to those aspects of life, it is a huge shift. It has been a huge shift in my life.
Right. And it feels like last week when we talked about the remembering versus learning, it's a remembering, so it feels so good because you're remembering something that has been true and is true.
Yeah. For me, with not seeing the body as sacred, that had huge implications for moving from my young life into adulthood, because when you become an adult, your body changes and you all of a sudden desire comes online. You start to experience like your body, your sexuality, and that can feel really scary if you view the body as, if you're categorizing the sacred and the profane, the body is the profane. The body is the thing that you're a little bit afraid of. If you don't see your body as sacred and holy and beautiful, then desire can feel suspect. And I think, growing up in purity culture, in the upbringing that I come from, there was a sense of like, well, yeah, the body, God made our bodies and it's meant for a certain thing. And we can set apart our bodies as holy and like those things. That was spoken for sure. It was like set you have to view yourself as, it's not that there wasn't a sense of reverence for the body. It was just that in this very small way, it can be sacred if you...
Right. One of the terms that we used was flesh. It was just flesh, and you need to, what the things you should do with your flesh as you become more holy. So there was a sense of separating body and holiness or being divine.
So yeah, I think when you see the body and the earth as lesser than the things of the kingdom or the things of God, then it's in a different category. It feels either unimportant, like, yeah, whatever, it's just my body. Someday I'm not going to be in a body and it's not going to matter. Once again, separating heavenly things as being higher and more important than physical things of earth. So those distinctions really had a big impact. And yeah, for me, I was on the path of purity and as an Enneagram 3 and someone who from a young age was really reminded to live right in lots of different ways. That was ingrained in me. I was probably one of the rare ones who was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I am going to stick to that. I am going to have that white wedding dress mean what it's supposed to mean when I walk down the aisle. And I, in some ways I made it to that point feeling proud, but what that did was developed a lot of judgment in me. And also it caused me to miss out on, I was very, very disassociated from my body, from my pleasure, from seeing any of that on my own as sacred and beautiful. And that's something that I'm still working to reclaim, working to see now my physical body, especially as a woman. I remind my kids all the time, 3 of whom are, women, and I got one non-binary there. But yes, this reminder that your bodies are going to change so much over your lifetime. You are going to have, your body's going to change shape. It's going to perform different functions. It's going to feel different. It's going to look different. Be prepared. That is part of what it means to be feminine, to have a feminine form. You will change, just like the earth changes and goes through seasons, just like there's so much change and fluctuation. So at this point in my later, jumping into this midlife phase, learning to see the beauty and sacredness of my body, of even the change of my desires as my physical body changes, all of that, seeing that as sacred and beautiful has been very important for me.
So we were talking earlier about how, the whole idea of divine feminine and its terminology that's come around in just the last few years that's helped explain something that I've been experiencing or remembering for many years, the last 14 years, something like that. And it's nice to find words to define things, but then a lot of times everyone has different definitions of that word. So this is one of those things. But it came from also along the journey learning that I was a divine human. That terminology came up. It just kind of floored me because I realized the way I grew up, there was a big emphasis on holiness or divine or, basically getting rid of the flesh and becoming holy and becoming pure and becoming Christ-like and all of those things. And so that's kind of how I lived. And then as I began remembering, I was remembering, as Sarah was sharing, the body and the earth and natural and nature and cycles and life cycles and female cycles and all of these things. And that was the very feminine part. And so when this word came up, divine human, I got so excited because I realized I don't have to just be divine and be, trying to become this divine creature that can do all these amazing things with consciousness, but I can also just be human and find so much beauty and so much spirit and life in the fact that I'm human. So it was such a switch for me. It had happened already, but it was like the terminology was so fun because it was like, yeah, it's both. It's both. We get to be both. And that was so exciting. And so similar with learning the divine feminine, it's the feminine energy that I hold, and realizing that it's sacred. It's earthy. It's natural. It's real. It's like body to the ground. Like we go back into the dirt also, but it's also this intuition and it's this knowing and it's these moments where a mom can hear or knows that something's going on with their kid and the kid's 4 doors down, and it's just these moments where there's these unexplainable things that are definitely more in our consciousness and in the things that we're not necessarily seeing with our physical eye. So that's just kind of my side to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I love that.
That's why these terms, even though they're not fully understood or understood in many different ways, they're meaning a lot to me because they're describing something that's been going on in the remembering over a decade. So,
yeah, the body as sacred is huge, and I have a print that I made in my studio here, and it says the body knows the way. And it has 3 geese flying on it. When you were saying like this intuition or the maternal knowing, mother's intuition, it made me think of the fact that, so often we feel separate and very different from the animal kingdom, right? And that's another thing I think that we were both, maybe you and I, Andrea, ingrained to remember, like, we're not like the animals. Like, right. we're different than the rest of the natural world, because we have this ability to have the Holy Spirit within us or whatnot. And, that's very different than a lot of animistic cultures or, other traditions that would see divinity within every aspect of life. And I think that that's really changed for me in the last 10 plus years. It's like seeing, wait a minute, what animates us, the energy that gives our cells the power to function, is the same energy that's in a seed that knows what it's meant to become. It's like, how is it different? And when I really started to sit with that, it's like, so wow, like what does that mean for our bodies being sacred, and how that idea of this print that I have, like my intention behind it, the body knows the way. My younger self would have looked at that and been like, what? What do you mean by that? Like, the body is dangerous. Like, no way. Like, we can't trust our bodies. Like, because I had so much fear ingrained around trusting. If you just trust your urges, like if you just trust what you want, if you just trust what you desire, you could get into so much trouble. That's what I would have thought. And I'm not saying that that's not true. But what I'm saying is, can we sit with the fact that just like those geese that fly in formation do that without having to mentally think about it, it's in them to have an instinct to go where they are meant to go. How are we? Like, I think it's just an interesting question. What is similar within us that we can trust that our body has a knowing that is beyond the mind, and that has a beauty and an intelligence that is ingrained that really does perhaps come from the sacred, really does perhaps come from the divine.
Wow. Yeah, so as I'm sitting here with these two beautiful women, I have to say I can feel their passion and I can feel their joy in coming into this beautiful space of discovering more of a holistic part of who they are and how they express themselves in this world. I'm included as well. I just have, I feel like a student today. And, but I do want to just, something came up as you both have been sharing, and I'm just curious, like, okay, so you've both shared about your years growing up and what culture you were in and what those teachings taught you. I'm wondering, like, do you still see that separation or that unawareness of this whole other part in maybe people you know or people you follow that like are in some sort of spiritual community that you guys came from, or like, or do you think it's changing? I mean, I'm just curious. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but I'm just wondering if this is going to be a new concept for a lot of people, like, wow, or are others just like, yeah,
I see it changing in certain ways. I see kind of like what I said last week. I feel like the collective is shifting in its ability to recognize the body with more wisdom than we ever gave it. I think there is definitely, even when you look at like natural medicine, quote unquote, whether that's homeopathy, whether that's traditional Chinese medicine, whether it's acupuncture, all, anything that's deemed more natural and not Western and mainstream, it seems is becoming a little more acceptable in people's awareness. And I would actually even include talk therapy. Like, if you think of when we grew up, that was reserved probably for people with like real big, severe problems that they would go to, or like, there's something big in their family that's a crisis and they have to go to a counselor or a therapist. But that wasn't really seen as like natural and important to be able to go and process your feelings, because feelings would fall, I think, in that feminine aspect of life. And when you're only seeing through a masculine only lens, maybe like a more toxic masculine, but just only seeing masculine ideas as important, then you're just thinking of like, logic and reason and, science, what is proven, what is tangible. The things that are more unseen, like feelings and intuition and energy, would have been viewed as less important. Well, that's just woo-woo, that's fluffy, that's not real serious science, or that's not serious. Now we're beginning to see the integration of these other aspects, like the mind-body connection being looked at through the lens of science, where they're actually able to recognize that these things really matter and have an impact. So I think culturally speaking, but I know that within churches, there's certainly still going to be that divide between spirit and matter, where I'm sure unconsciously that might still be a pretty powerful tug. And I think it all depends on the community. But I do see I have a lot of friends who are in Christian churches who definitely recognize more of the importance of including reverence for the body, including reverence for emotion and the inner knowing and all of that. So yeah, I'm curious to know, how this will land for my friends or people in the world that are within spiritual communities, Christian communities, more traditional faiths, if this feels, like, what are they talking about? Or if there's a sense of like, no, I can see the recognition that it's helpful to have a sense of sacredness when you're looking at the body or the earth.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I see it happening in a lot of areas in society, and I feel like there's a remembering going on. I feel like even if it's just in people sharing desires and saying, I don't want it to look like this, I want it to look like that, or and just more accepted. I mean, a lot of it was really made fun of, even just using natural medicine was so made fun of, and it's less made fun of and more talked about as an option. And so I feel like, that the natural, the nature, the intuition, all of that is becoming, it's waking up, it's being remembered, and it's on a larger scale in many aspects of society. I would agree.
I would also just say, if we move beyond the body, so we were talking about like us as humans and seeing our own bodies as sacred, and not, and also just seeing our bodies as messengers, that our body has so much to tell us if we listen. That was a brand new concept for me, for sure. Like, wait, what? Listen to my body? I think all of us have been on a journey in different ways around what that looks like, to pay attention to not just like pain in our body, but like when I feel constricted, when I feel open, or versus when I feel tense. It's like recognizing that our bodies can give us information. Though that is a part of my intention for that print, The Body Knows the Way. It's not necessarily that you have to do everything your urges lead you toward. It's more like, pay attention. Our bodies have so much more wisdom than we think.
The empath, that's common now, where and I think it's really with our kids' generation. Like they'll say, oh, I'm an empath. Yeah, I go in a room and I feel everything. Like they know what that is. And that was, I mean, not even talked about 10 years ago. So I think there's a remembering, awakening, of an integrating of this back into our society slowly but surely.
Can we talk about this divine feminine quality, energy? And I want to know, like, for both of you, and perhaps I'll chime in as well, but like, how does this apply to you as a woman? In, being Sarah, being Andrea, being Cindy, like in a feminine body, right? Like, we've all agreed that there is a change happening in our planet, in our world, where women specifically are bringing, I don't know, how would you say it? Like, I just want to know what you think about that, because you had mentioned something earlier before we were recording, and it feels important to you. I'd love to know more.
I kind of feel like I have to tell a little bit of a background about why I think that, and maybe this is just my own experience, but what I shared last time on the podcast about how it all began with sickness in our bodies, and then led to starting a big garden for me, which then led to feeling a deeper connection to nature than I ever thought that I could. Part of that piece was connecting with my ancestors. I had the realization, like, wait, I'm Italian. Of course I'm going to be good at growing food. Of course I'm going to be drawn to this. This is so a part of every single member of my mother's side of the family was Italian, going back all the way back as far as I can trace. But that devotion to even ancestors was a powerful piece for me to realize, like, whoa, I had a sudden appreciation for Dia de los Muertos, setting up an ofrenda. We started doing that and made that a sacred part of the season for us, where I'm kind of rambling here, but in October, when we get our first killing frost in Colorado, that's always been a really hard one for me, because after finding so much joy in the beauty of the garden and, it just has become a huge part of my everyday, tending to my plants and, not just, enjoying them, but harvesting them and preserving them. When we finally get that snow or the really cold weather drop, it's like death to everything I love. And all the beauty goes away overnight. And for me, having grown up in California where there was evergreen plants all year round, it was like, what just happened? All of this work, all of the time I've spent since, January, February, tending my plant babies and then watching everything get lush and beautiful and green. For me, October, for the first maybe 5-6 years of doing that, I was like resisting it. Like, no, I don't want it to get cold. No, and I had this like, no, I don't want it to, I don't want death to come. And it made me see like, oh my gosh, this is life, Sarah. This is how much I was so disconnected from even the natural seasons of one year. It's like every single year we go around this wheel and we experience everything. We experience new life in the spring and the emergence of things from the cold. And then we see, fruits and blossoms, and then we see abundance, and then we see overabundance, and then we see you're kind of exhausted by all of the work to keep up with whether it's pruning back from the flowers or the plants, and you have so much food rotting on your countertop, and then death comes.
Yeah.
And then there's stillness, and there's quiet, and you wait. And you wait, and then it starts over again. Like that in itself, getting to go through the cycle of the seasons and feeling the wheel of the year, that is something our ancestors knew so much better than we did.
Yeah.
And they were so very connected because their life depended upon it. If they didn't preserve enough food, they would not live. If they didn't track where the sun was in the sky so they could grow their crops just right, if they didn't follow the waning and waxing of the moon, they wouldn't know how their animals were going to behave, how what was happening. I mean, they had so much more understanding of the natural world than we did. So for me, recognizing like, wait, my ancestors, and then it's like that one little thing, like you were talking about the slippery slope last week. Suddenly it was like, wait a minute, man, they knew so much more. And that awareness continued to feed my hunger for what I'd been missing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And
hunger for what we've been missing.
Yeah, and what you were asking about being in a feminine body. and I'd mentioned like teaching my daughters that, man, you are a changing being. You're meant to embody change. That is what the feminine here is. Not only that, but you're meant to embody what it means to bring about new life, and that new life requires change and stretching and pain and discomfort, but then power. I mean, there's so much about being in a feminine body that is magic. It is so magical, and it's literally like an analogy for so many things. Okay. Do you want to jump in before I feel like I'm
keep
just
going.
Okay.
I like where you're going.
Well, suddenly, of course, we have the miracle of childbirth, the miracle of what that experience teaches you for those that go through that. But I also just want to come back to this simple, there's a story in a book by Clark and Perdita Finn called The Way of the Rose. And it's this beautiful story of this man who is a Zen Buddhist, practicing Zen Buddhist, who had an apparition of the Virgin Mary, which he was not expecting.
Ooh.
And he ended up learning about the rosary and the power of the divine feminine that's hidden within this practice of praying the rosary, which was so unusual and not unexpected for him. In that book, he tells a story, it's a very short little chapter called Moses versus Mama. And I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to try and just kind of tell you the general gist of it. But basically he reminds people in the book that if you go to ancient Israel, if you go to Israel even today, and you go and do an archaeological dig, you will very, very likely find these little statues of the goddess. And she may have been called Asherah. That's one of the names for her. But even in this place that represented, where Moses came from, if you go back far enough, that culture too revered the mother, the divine mother. But there's a story in, I believe it comes from Jewish cultural memory, that talks about this silly story that basically Moses wanted to, he asked for God to take away his belly button. He said, I don't want it anymore. I want you to get rid of my belly button. And God was like, well, I don't know if I can are you sure you want me to do that? And Moses was like, yes, I'm sick of it. I don't want it anymore. I want you to remove it. So God is like, well, you got to remember that everything I make is for a reason. Right. And so basically God agrees. He says, okay, lay down on Mount Sinai. And God brings down this giant screwdriver and starts to unscrew his belly button. Moses stands up and his butt falls off. So this is just like a little silly story. But what Clark talks about in this is that in so many patriarchal cultures, we want to erase the fact that we had a mother. Mm-hmm. And the belly button is proof that we all once had a mother. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, why have I never, like, oh my gosh, like, it's literally this beautiful, it's like something you can never get rid of.
Right.
That will forever be a reminder, a scar that shows that you were once fed by something outside of you. You come from somewhere. There is something, a thread that connects you to your mother and your mother's mother and your mother's mother's mother. And that is actually, we actually carry our mitochondrial DNA. Mm-hmm. That mitochondrial DNA is only passed along from mother to daughter. And it's something that geneticists can trace certain things back because of that. And I just think it's also a really powerful spiritual concept when you look at the fact, isn't it interesting that we name our children and our families and our culture, we take the last name of the father, mm-hmm. and yet there's something totally unique and distinct that we only carry, that mother to daughter passes down. And I don't know, that just gives me the chills, mm-hmm. to get to carry that. It's powerful.
Well, I think it's also with our sons as well, not mm-hmm. just mother daughter, but so if you have a mm-hmm. son or a daughter, mm-hmm. so for example, my two children, I have a son and a daughter, mm-hmm. and my son also is receiving that mitochondrial DNA imprint mm-hmm. from me, and up to, what do they say, 7 generations of mothers
okay
in my line. So it's not just
female
to female. He doesn't pass it back on. Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking, but still, it's not just
it's something that mothers pass on. And I just think
I like where you're going with this, though. This is really powerful.
I just feel that as women, I was not given this awareness at all about the power and beauty of being a woman, and the magic of our bodies. Yeah. I think even when you think about like your cycle, starting your period, that was for me just like, oh my gosh, like at first I was desperate to get it because I thought there was something wrong with me because everyone else had in my high school and I hadn't. Then once it arrived, it's like, oh, you want to, like, it feels like an inconvenience and you want to hide it. And then all the talk around PMS and how embarrassing if you act like crazy. And
right. Yeah.
And yet now here I am, 49, and I'm reading these books. Oh my gosh, there's so much to learn that I wish I had known when I was still regularly cycling, about the fact that tracking those 4 months or the 4 weeks out of every month can teach you so much about your life, and even on a spiritual level, like having an awareness of oh my gosh, this is mirroring the 4 seasons of the year, that when I'm menstruating, it's like I'm in my inner winter. And that is a time of like quiet, just like when there's snow covering the ground in the wintertime, nobody's working and the plants aren't making leaves and fruit. Everybody's resting. So what if we took that time that week and just rested? And then the week after that, you're moving out of the rest into spring. And that's when you start new projects. That's when you jump into, you use that energy that your body's giving you to do things. Then when you get up into, I forget what the technical term of it is, follicular phase, then there's luteal.
Yeah.
But you get to the opposite week and you are in your full summer phase. This is when you're like powerful and strong and you can work out like crazy at the gym and you have all this energy. And then it's like, as you move into fall, you start to go back into like, okay, so there's outward seasons of the month and there's inward seasons of the month. What if I knew that?
Yeah.
What if I had known that, instead of feeling like, why do I feel so tired right now? Or
Right.
why am I, and always questioning yourself, always, what if women were given this information at a young age, and like, your body has so much wisdom and power. Pay attention to it. Listen to it. Track it. Oh, if you're feeling tired, perfect. This is your time to start. Make sure you're journaling everything you're learning right now, because you're going inward. This is your time to go inward. Don't force yourself to do things at that time every month. If that's the time your body's telling you to listen, listen.
Don't you think if we were taught that a little more, then it would be a lot easier to not follow just every urge, because we would be listening to our body with each urge. And what is it telling me? Not just, oh, I feel like doing this, I'm going to go do that. Oh man, I wish I hadn't done that. But you're actually, if your body's sacred and all of a sudden there's urges, it's like, well, where is that coming from? Why is that happening? And you're starting to listen to the wisdom instead of just walk around like a chicken with your head cut off. I don't know. I'm just wondering if those two things are connected.
Yes. And what if, which I think it's happening, but what if our men and our boys were taught something totally different as well, as far as how they think and feel about their sisters and their mothers and their partners, girlfriends, wives, when their bodies are going through change, as opposed to the norm of like, ew, I can't go buy tampons, or this is embarrassing, or, oh yeah, she's just in a mood. Like, how degrading.
Right.
So anyway, we could go on that topic for a while, but I'm just saying, like,
but I think there is, I'm hopeful for that. It's beginning to shift culturally.
it is. I'm hearing more conversations.
Yeah. And also, same as women, we are in this stage of life where being, there's a lot of different terminology, like, are you in perimenopause or are you not in perimenopause? When does it start? When does it end? It's like there's so much. Basically, when you start to feel some big shifts in your body and in your energy and in your desire to be alone, in your, body temperature regulation, or all the different things, you are there. You've arrived into this time of change.
Yeah.
There's a book that I would highly recommend called Wise Power. Women who began a school called redschool.net. You can go on their website and get their books, but they have 2 books. One is called Wild Power, which is about tracking your feminine cycle, like I was explaining, about knowing, the 4 weeks of each month and how to use that to really be in sync with your body's wisdom and power as a younger woman. And then Wise Power, the second book, is all about the transition into the wise woman years through and after menopause. And that's where we're kind of more closer to that space, and definitely in that journey, and recognizing that for me, instead of, oh no, all these things are going haywire. Why am I feeling this way? Whether it's sleep disturbance, whether it's feeling like having headaches or there's just so many different things that women in this stage are experiencing. I think the outer, maybe more masculine driven world sees that as a problem to solve. Like, how do we solve this problem? Oh, And you know, there is a shift now, at least where more people are speaking about menopause instead of it just being totally silent and nobody discussing it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, I feel, a big that's improvement, of course, that it's being talked about, but it's still similar to what you were saying about the feminist movement. We're still tackling it with a masculine perspective, which is like, how do we control that? How do we make those problems go away so that women can function infinitely like men and stay relevant and stay beautiful and stay the way that they want to stay,
Right.
static? And that is not what femininity
No.
is.
We should be looking forward to this time. This should be an exciting arrival. Like every young girl should be like, okay, I'm going to go through this stage and this stage, and I can't wait for that stage because these wise old women are powerful and wise and amazing
and beautiful and like not just
and needed.
like the old crone that gets pushed to the side of the road
No.
because she's ugly and scary and she doesn't care what anybody thinks and she says whatever she wants. It's like, actually, what if we got to embody? I mean, this is what I want to call in. Like, we will be.
Mm-hmm.
Let's claim that we will be women that our daughters can say, that is what's ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That is exciting. That's what we need in this culture, I think, so badly, is more women embodying their beautiful feminine power. So yes, there's a lot, I think, there's a lot I feel about that, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are so many resources. I just want to say, I guess for us, let's see, Cindy has Korean heritage as well as European heritage. You and I both have primarily European heritage. People who have more indigenous heritage within them, in America at least, have, if they can connect to those indigenous roots, still have more intact in terms of lineages that carried this wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our ancestors, unfortunately, did their very best to wipe out every shred of that wisdom, sadly, because of through, settler colonial mindset and the residential schools and all the horrors that happened here in North America. But they managed to, in many pockets, carry forth this beautiful indigenous knowledge and wisdom, where primarily women are the wisdom keepers around, whether it's medicinal plants or the sacred knowledge of the body and all of that. And it's kind of beautiful. It's very beautiful to see our culture desiring to reclaim that wisdom in different ways. And I do think it's also important to remember that no matter where we come from, our people, if you go back far enough, each one of our cultures had that wisdom that was, there are ancestors in your Korean background. I know, Cindy, in both of ours and in all of them, wherever we originated from, we once knew that we came from the earth. We knew the medicines that could heal us. We had an awareness of how to survive on land. We had an awareness of the fact that we belonged to the land. And I think we're in a time where that knowledge is being woken up again through longing, through desire, through hunger, through the fact that, we're in this information age now. We can share this information. We can get it quickly and spread it quickly. That feels really beautiful and important that we're able to do that. I have one more thought before we close, and this is just around what are the practical, physical manifestations of what this looks like when you start to see matter, mother, when you start to see the material world as sacred. How does that look? I think for me, I remember visiting one of my dear friends' houses here in town, Bryn, who has always been very connected to the natural world. And it was when we were both homeschooling. She had her boys and I had my kiddos running around together. So we had 7 little feral ones running around on her property. And her and I would spend a lot of time in conversation. And one of the things I loved about her home is that she had nature objects displayed like they were sacred art pieces. And it would be like, maybe a branch with some lichen on it, or an animal bone that they had found on one of their nature walks, a leaf that was particularly beautiful, or an acorn. And it made an impact on me just seeing the way that she just had kind of a minimalist home, but these found objects were so beautiful sitting in her house, and recognizing like, wow, look at that. And then this idea of an altar appeared, in my world. Of course, boy, just that one word brings up all sorts of triggers from my past, because, the only reference coming from a Judeo-Christian background to altar is sacrifice, the blood draining down the left side of the altar and whatever. Or it was like evil rituals, like satanic rituals, and then the word pagan. I mean, can we unpack that? Like everything we're talking about right now would be considered pagan,
right,
when we're talking about returning to the earth. And yet that word pagan literally means of the earth. Like, it means not a city dweller. It means a person out in the country. It means someone who's not civilized or in the city. I mean, I will gladly call myself a pagan, but from a religious perspective and a cultural perspective, that for me as a young person was scary. The word pagan was scary. But when you look at the word altar as something that is a place in your home or your space that is devoted to having sacred images there to direct you toward the divine, or toward what you would desire to focus your life on, or, I suppose in a Catholic church you have an altar. Maybe there's a lot of churches that the altar doesn't have to sound creepy or scary, but for me it felt scary. So I have an altar in my and this isn't where I like bow down to the sacred altar and this and but it's like, we as humans, we need ritual, and we have rituals whether we think we do or we don't. We make our coffee every morning, or we check the whether it's like, I'm going to go turn off the water in my garden and walk the perimeter and check on the things. Like, everybody creates rituals that tether them to their life, that show us what is important in life. Do you guys have any rituals that have developed in your life that you feel are connected at all to this?
I want more. That's one of the things I'm hungry for, is more rituals, for sure, because I do have that sense that they're part of being that human feminine embodiment here. Yeah.
Okay, so you've mentioned Bryn on previous podcasts, and I'm curious, would your friend Bryn say that these objects that she has around her house, would she call them sacred, or would she just say it's a leaf? I'm just curious.
Oh, Bryn, I wish you would come on this podcast and talk about it yourself, because everything Bryn says is so profound. I think that she doesn't see any distinction between all of it. It's all sacred, It's like, I was so focused on like trying to get my plants, my annual vegetables to grow well, and I would go to her house and she'd be like talking to the kochia weed, which is something that's very invasive, with such awe and reverence, like, look at your determination. Or like, she taught me to revere bindweed as like, for its determination, even though we all want to pull our hair out with how prolific and bindweed can be, and how it's so hard to keep your garden beds tended when you have bindweed. But I think is able to see the beauty in and that sacredness in all of it.
Yeah, I like that. I was asking because I get a little tripped up sometimes with words. I think I mentioned that on the last episode, and I was talking to my to my husband this morning before the podcast, and we were just talking about divine feminine and that wording divine, right? And what distinguishes divine versus feminine and why use divine. And he goes, well, remember when you were asking me for more like devotion to sacred intimacy? And I had to ask, this is my husband, he's like, so like, what is sacred intimacy to you? Like, what's the difference between intimacy and sacred intimacy, right? So side note, I just
Yeah, but that's a good question.
it
It's
was
like
a
when
good
something
question.
is sacred, it's important, it's set aside.
Yeah, you become more aware of why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing what you're doing. And I think that's why this question of ritual does feel important, because you're not just going through the motions to satisfy just to satisfy, but you actually have a deeper meaning and purpose behind why you're doing what you're doing, and it becomes less selfish. I think it also just expands more love in general, so which is really, it's just, it's really beautiful. So, okay, my question about ritual. Yes, I love having beautiful, meaningful objects around my house. I often will find them when I'm out walking my dogs. And I won't be looking for anything in particular, but I'll know when an object presents itself, like a leaf or a feather or a stone. And I think you taught me this, Sarah, or maybe it was just through conversations with some of these women that are in our lives. But again, and actually, I think you mentioned it on a previous show, but, just to have like the sacred piece and even just what's presented to you. I think your friend Bryn taught you this, like, to even like have the respect to ask if it's something that you can take and like put in your home, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's more of like the nature aspect, the materialistic aspect.
Because if we see all things as sacred, if we recognize,
there's like a respect.
Yeah, if we recognize it, then we don't just see it as something you can
It's
just
like reciprocity. That's the word.
Yeah, the giving and taking from nature, recognizing like, what am I giving back?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think I've got a lot of rituals. They actually are really important for me. They ground me. They keep me present. They remind me of my purpose. And they're not just things I look at. Like, I have physical rituals as well. And I think for me, they've been an important part of my growth.
Oh man, so yeah, my little altar is, something I want to spend more time with and like tend it more than I do. That would be an intention that I have. I know there's some beautiful practices of just like changing it up every season, when it's springtime, putting some objects there that remind you of spring, and just to bring your attention to the season you're in and remember that what you see outside of you reflects something within as well. Like, if we all are nature, our bodies are a part of this beautiful world, and therefore when there's a season on the outside that we're experiencing, whether it's the heat of summer or the cold and darkness of winter, it's like there's something to reflect back within. So, but yeah, for me, I actually have some different, objects, different stones that have been important to me. I have a thing with acorns because of my my story, so I love to collect those. But I have a cross that symbolizes my my devotion to Jesus and the story of Jesus and all that Jesus has meant for me. And then I have a little a little bowl of, or a little jar of soil from my ancestors' homeland in Italy, which is sacred, and just to remind me where my roots come from in different ways. So there's lots of things you can have on an altar, having objects that were from my hometown in Santa Cruz. Those are really meaningful to me, just to remind me of my journey and the parts of my life that come from the sea and the ocean, the coastal region that I come from. So I think it's beautiful to be able to incorporate these aspects of who we are. We are connected to nature. We will one day become food for all of the decomposers, if whether that's land or sea or wherever it is. And I think I just find that to be very meaningful, and that wasn't my story when I was younger, and I love that that's become a part of my life at this point. And to me, that is all a part of this divine feminine aspect of awareness. People sometimes call it the sacred feminine. It can be, those two words I feel like are interchangeable.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
You don't?
Well, I don't want to go there right now.
Okay, that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they're not interchangeable, according to Andrea.
Whole new subject.
Whole new
Sacred and
subject.
divine are not interchangeable.
Not for me.
Okay.
That's
I like
okay.
it.
That's
Yeah.
good. I love it. I think sacred is like set apart and revered, or like intentional.
True. Yeah.
And if you're talking about divine, then I guess
We're going into the big and the unseen.
yes,
And
and like
consciousness and the things
source.
that are beyond human sight.
True. Yeah.
okay, I like it. This is we're getting into it now. There's so much to talk about
Really
here.
think about it. That distinction is important.
Well, I love all of this, and I love you, both of you. Thank you
Yes,
for
we love you.
being here and talking about these things. And I think there's definitely more to come and more to chew on in this arena. But hopefully it's been interesting to those that are listening. And yeah, I have a new email address that we started for the pod. It's called oneandotherpod@gmail.com.
Cool.
So if anybody has comments or questions or would love to join the conversation, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. So that's available, and
That's exciting.
I think we'll call it good for this episode. But thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks to you, my friends. And we'll keep learning what this means to be embodied and to see all those parts of us as sacred. Love you both.
Love it.